brand new unit, and it really begins with we finished the last unit with the shots being fired at Fort Sumter, which is technically the first battle of what? The Civil War. Okay, so today we're going to get down into the actual fighting that takes place during the war. Okay, so going into the war, both sides, the North and the South, were flying high. They both had high expectations for quick victory. All right, the North, they had quick expectations for victory. Is like they thought they were just going to straight up march to Richmond, the capital of the Confederacy, burn it down, and it'd be over. Okay, in fact, the very first battle of the first land battle, I guess you could say, between armies is called the Battle of Bull Run. The Battle of Bull Run. There were actually two battles at Bull Run. This is the first battle of Bull Run. Here, raw Yankee recruits. If you're a Yankee, which side are you for? North. If you're a rebel, you are South. So these raw Yankee recruits kind of swaggered their way out of Washington, thinking they were just going to destroy the Confederacy. And they began to march towards Bull Run, which is in Virginia. And on July the 21st of 1861, it was almost like they were heading to a sporting event. Like congressmen brought their families, people came to the battle and like brought picnic baskets and like sat on the sides and watched it. It was like a sporting event, the first battle of Bull Run. And everybody totally anticipated that the North would just completely, wouldn't even be a fight, okay? But at first, the battle went well for the North. Things were looking good. But then, the leadership of this man, General Thomas Jonathan Jackson, amidst a barrage of cannon fire, musket balls whizzing by his head, the Confederates were retreating. But he just sat on his horse right in the middle of it and did not move and ordered all the men to get back to the line and showed his bravery. And that's what earned him the name Stonewall, because he stood there like a stone wall. The reason why he was able to do this is because of his religious beliefs. Of all the religions that we've talked about since you guys have been here since the 9th grade, what might be one that would lead him to believe, I'm just as safe in battle as I am at home in bed? Like it's not up to him when his time is. Can you guess one? The one with predestination is absolutely right. What's that one with predestination? Calvinism. He was a Calvinist. But because he was able to show his bravery and instill courage into his men, the Confederate reinforcements arrived and panicked the young Yankee troops. And many of them fled in shameful confusion. Therefore, giving the victory to the Confederates. They won the first battle of Bull Run. Probably overall a bad thing. What are the effects? What are the implications of the Confederates winning the first real battle of the Civil War? If you are a member of the Confederacy and you see that in the first battle you win, what does that do for your psychology, for your morale?
You get overly confident.
Overly confident. We are going to win. But remember when we looked at it on paper before we even started all this fighting? Do they really have a chance of winning? They have no manufacturing. They're going to shoot with bow and arrows. They have no people. They're outnumbered 3-1 with no bullets. Does it seem like a good likelihood of victory? No. And so the Confederates gaining this first victory has significant psychological and political consequences, which, and many of them are paradoxical. What does that word mean? It would have probably been better if they lost. Victory was actually worse for them than defeat would have been. Because they would have been like, okay, we got a big challenge ahead of us. We really got to buckle down and work on some of these weaknesses we have. But they won. And so then they just kind of thought they could, overinflated their idea of what the war was going to be like. And they were already dangerously overconfident. And then when they get a victory, ego sets in. Okay? So, and I put a map on here and stuff. I don't expect you to understand and know the movements of the different brigades within. No. Okay? Just know it's the first battle, when it took place, who this guy was, Thomas John Stonewall Jackson, and who won, and why was that victory important. Okay? All right, so here's some key players early in the Civil War and throughout. George McClellan. I call him Tardy George. Very cocky man. Has a curious mixture of virtues and defects. He's a superb organizer, an excellent drill master. He can train troops maybe better than any general. But he's a perfectionist. Why would perfectionist probably not be a great virtue to have as a commander of all the military for the Union?
You would want to wait for the perfect time to do anything.
That's absolutely right. He's not going to take any brash action. He's not going to be aggressive because there's never a perfect opportunity to attack in any war. Okay, it's not. You're not going to ever be like, okay, hey, we're here, we're chilling, we're not ready to fight. Come fight us. That doesn't happen. Okay, and so he's kind of called Tardy George because he has a case of the slows. He was overcautious. Lincoln even accuses him of saying he has a case of the slows. Lincoln, obviously, you should know him. He's the president of the United States during the Civil War. But McClellan was brilliant. He was young. He's only 34 years old. Many of his contemporaries called him a young Napoleon. I mean, he was good at what he did. He just probably was not the best person to be in charge of the whole thing. But as far as his other responsibilities, very talented. And, the entire, when we say he has the slows, he's not doing anything. He's not going on the attack. The Army's just kind of hanging out in Washington, and he's drilling them and training them obsessively. So they're becoming very well trained. They're just, not doing anything in terms of winning the war, okay? So he's not moving toward Richmond. He's not making any advances. And how do you think Northerners are responding to that? People of the North, particularly newspapers in the North. Yeah, okay, so we fought one battle, we got our butts kicked, and now you're just kind of hanging out. So the newspapers were very critical of George McClellan. But are they putting pressure on McClellan to do something? Because, no, who's his boss? Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln is the one feeling the pressure. And so, finally, Abraham Lincoln is able to convince McClellan to make a move. And at last, reluctantly, meaning he didn't want to, McClellan decides upon a waterborne approach to Richmond. This waterborne approach becomes known as the Peninsula Campaign because that area of Virginia from Jamestown at the James River to Richmond is kind of a peninsula. If you count the James River as the body of water. So McClellan warily inches towards the Confederate capital with about 100,000 men. And after about a month, he takes the historic city of Yorktown. And at Yorktown, like, he was so slow because he thought they had so much artillery, big cannons. They were just wooden. They were like wooden decoys to make the Confederates built to make the Yankees think that they had a bunch of cannons. They were just wooden, just logs painted black, basically. I think that's pretty slick. But, I mean, it's not going to help you win a war, wooden cannons. It's going to slow them down because, fear of 50 cannons pointed at you, that'll slow you down. But one of the heroes of this Peninsula Campaign that emerges is this man, Robert Edward Lee. Robert E. Lee. Robert E. Lee was asked to have George McClellan's job. Abraham Lincoln wanted Robert E. Lee to be the commander of the entire Union Army. But Robert E. Lee is from Virginia, Arlington, Virginia. And he decides that he's going to stay home and fight for his state. And he becomes commander of all the armies of Virginia. Oh, the first Battle of Bull Run, by the way, just as a little fun fact. It was fought in this guy's property, and his name was Wilmer McLean. Wilmer McLean. And he's like, geez, this is dangerous. I'm getting out of here. And so he and his entire family moved to Appomattox, Virginia. Okay? 100 miles away. So he's like, I'm getting away from this. And it just so happens that he moves to a house, and like, whenever the war comes to an end, and Robert E. Lee and Ulysses S. Grant meet to discuss peace, they do it at Wilmer McLean's house in Appomattox. So literally the first battle was fought in Wilmer McLean's front yard, and then the Civil War ended in his parlor, like totally by accident. Okay? So that's just kind of an interesting fact. Okay. All right, so now the Union, they got to buckle down. All right? They're starting to have some significant bloody battles. 20,000 casualties per battle. Big time. Okay? Big time fighting, big time losses. And so now they have to come up with a strategy. And this strategy becomes known as the Anaconda Plan. And it's a plan of total war. A plan of total war. It has 6 components. The Anaconda Plan has 6 components. First of all, what does an anaconda do? How does it eat and kill its prey? Is it poisonous bite? What does it do?
It wraps its body around them.
That's right. An anaconda is a constrictor, okay? And it squeezes the life out of its prey, and then it can eat it as it wishes. How might the Union squeeze the life out of the South? What does it look like this snake is doing in this picture? How might, in actual practicality, how might one nation cut off another nation? Blockade. Okay, so blockade is certainly going to be one way to suffocate the South, as they don't have a lot of food production there. They have a lot of agriculture. Are they producing a lot of food? What are they producing? Cotton. Cotton doesn't taste very good. So first, that is the first component. They're going to slowly suffocate the South by blockading its coasts. What do you need to do that? Ships, and ships that are operated by the military, what is that? Navy, okay? So you have to have a lot of ships. No problem, right? Do you see how big this coastline is? Is that a little bit of coastline or a lot of coastline? That's a lot of coastline. Easy to do or hard to do? Very hard to do, okay? But that's the first plan. They're going to try to slowly suffocate the South by blockading its coast. Second, liberate the slaves and hence undermine the economic foundations of the South. So what is the purpose of freeing slaves? Is it to bring equality and goodwill towards all men and humanity and have equality amongst the races? What is the purpose of freeing the slaves? To undermine the economic foundations of the South. That is the purpose. To make Southern wealthy people destitute. To make the wealthy poor. To harm the economy. Do you think this plan would have been approved if the plan was to liberate the slaves for the sake of freedom and humanity and equality? No, of course not. People were just as racist in the North as they were in the South. People in the North did not even think themselves equal to black people, white people and black people. Okay? So it was to undermine the economy of the South. All right, that's the second. Third, cut the Confederacy in half by seizing control of the Mississippi River. As you can see, the Mississippi River on this map, it flows right through here. Okay? The Union wants to take control of the Mississippi River. In doing so, you're going to separate the slave states, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas, are going to be cut off from the remainder of these. Okay? Fourth, they're going to invade the South through Georgia and the Carolinas. Invade the South through Georgia and the Carolinas. Fifth, destroy its capital city. What's the capital city of the Confederacy? Richmond. Destroy Richmond. Sixth, this kind of gets added later on once McClellan is gone and Ulysses S. Grant takes charge. Ulysses S. Grant says, we're going to engage the enemy's main strength and grind it into submission. Essentially making everyone an enemy, even if you're not a soldier. Total war. Pretty ruthless tactics. Okay? So this is the plan, Anaconda plan. Some of these things are easier to accomplish than others. Does the plan ultimately work? Who wins the war? The Union. It doesn't. It's not going to be over by Christmas like they initially thought it would. It takes about 4 Christmases to get it accomplished, but they eventually are able to do it. So, but the first aspect of the Anaconda plan was the blockade, and so the blockade started, and it's pretty pretty leaky blockade. Stuff's getting through. Okay, it was not clamped down at all, but it was extended by a little bit. And I mean, let's get real. A watertight patrol of 3,500 miles of coastline is impossible. It's impossible. Okay, so not to mention that our Navy's kind of weak, anyways. It's not like we were known for having a fantastic Navy, but blockading was simplified by concentrating on certain ports like Savannah, like Norfolk, like Charleston, South Carolina, the major ports. Who does have the most powerful Navy in the world at this time? Who's always had the most powerful Navy? British. Are the British doing trade with the South? What's the British do for their economy? What's their big thing? We even stole the plans from them. That guy Samuel Slater, remember him? What did he steal the plans of and start doing in the United States? Say it again. What kind of factory? Textile mills. Does the South have something of great value to a textile mill? Cotton. How do you think the British are going to feel about this blockade? Why not?
Because they won't get any cotton.
That's right. And that's bad for their economy. Whom do you think Britain might be more likely to support in this? It looks like the South, because they are what that's their principal trade partners. The North, the Union, they see the Union as competition. They even have to pay tariffs for these manufactured goods that they sell. The Confederacy doesn't have any tariffs. You remember the tariff of abominations? All the people in the South, like South Carolina, is like, we're going to secede over this BS tariff that you guys, it's hurting us and helping you. So it would appear that the British are going to want to favor the South. But the Britain plainly do not really get involved and choose a side immediately. They kind of hold back and wait to see how things are going to pan out. Okay? But both the North and the South come up with some ways in which they're able to either enforce a blockade better or break the blockade. And what they did was they created these new types of warships called Ironsides. Ironsides. They're called Ironsides because they have iron sides. Why is that an advantage? Yeah. What did they have before Ironsides? Wooden boats. What happens when you shoot a wooden boat with a cannonball? It sinks. What happens when you shoot a boat made of iron with a cannonball? I guess everybody on board gets a headache because it's very loud. But it just bounces off for the most part. Okay? So both the North and the South created these iron ships. The North created their ship called the Monitor. And the Confederate ship is called the Merrimac. And they actually met in battle once. And they shot cannons at each other. They rammed each other. And nothing happened. I'm not going to say these are unsinkable, but they could not sink each other. Now, whenever these ships came upon wooden ships, they could just ram into them and just sail right through them. How cool would that be to have that job? I think that would be fun. I don't want to, be in war or anything, but I think that would be a fun job. You're guaranteed to win, It's like having a gun versus a bow and arrow. All right, so um, the Monitor and the Merrimack, um, they did have a historic battle. Ultimately, the Merrimack, as the war grinds on and the Union encroaches more and more, the Southerners destroyed it. They destroyed their own ship so that it wouldn't fall into the hands of the Union. Kind of sad. You'd think they'd just go use it, but I don't know. I'm not a military tactician. Okay? All right. This is an early turning point in the war. An early turning point. Robert E. Lee, with his brilliant military tactics, had broken the back of McClellan's assault on Richmond. So McClellan, in his Peninsula campaign, was unsuccessful in attacking the city of Richmond. And after the second battle at Bull Run, Lee, basically gave them a very crushing defeat. So now Robert E. Lee is feeling good, and the South is feeling good. They're emboldened by their success. And so Lee daringly decides to march northward into Maryland, as he hoped that he could strike a blow that would not only encourage Great Britain to get involved, but to be involved on their side. It's like, hey, because Maryland is a border state. Is Maryland part of the Confederacy, or is Maryland part of the Union? Maryland stayed loyal to the Union. It's a slave state, but it remained loyal to the Union. So when Robert E. Lee goes to Maryland, what is he doing? He's invading the North. It's a pretty brash and bold move. Because if you recall, one of the strengths of the South, do they have to invade the North? They just have to not lose. But Robert E. Lee's he feels very encouraged after having several victories in a row. So he invades into the North, in Maryland. And events finally converged toward a critical battle on what is on the banks of Antietam Creek, which is in Maryland. And at the Battle of Antietam, George McClellan strikes a little bit of luck when just two privates in the Union Army are just kind of walking around on a path one day, and they find this little bundle on the ground. It's just laying there. And this bundle had some cigars in it and Robert E. Lee's battle plans. So a Confederate officer dropped them while he was transporting them. Careless Confederate officer. So now George McClellan has a very crucial piece of intelligence in hand. I guess he can create his perfect plan now. And McClellan succeeded in halting Robert E. Lee at the Battle of Antietam in one of the bitterest and bloodiest days of the war. Very bloody battle. I think 4,000 people died. It's a lot. At the height of COVID, there were like 4,000 people dying every day. So it was like we had an Antietam every day. That's the history teacher in me, the way I think about stuff like that. So it's kind of weird. Not as bloody as Antietam, but still sad. But the landmark Battle of Antietam was one of the most decisive engagements in world history, and it probably the most decisive of the Civil War. And Jefferson Davis was probably like he was the president of the Confederacy. He was probably never again so near victory as he was before the Battle of Antietam. So Antietam was the long-awaited victory that Abraham Lincoln needed for launching something that he had been planning on doing for quite some time, but needed to have a decisive victory before he could do it. And what was that he wanted to do? The Emancipation Proclamation. Antietam served as the needed emancipation springboard. The halting of Lee's offensive was just enough of a victory to justify Lincoln's issuing of his preliminary emancipation and of formally announcing it on January the 1st, 1863. Formally announces it. What is it? Where? In the South. What about the border states? What about Maryland and Delaware and Kentucky and Missouri? Does he free the slaves there? No. So he frees the slaves where he has no authority, and doesn't free them where he does. That's what the Emancipation Proclamation does. It is not the law that frees the slaves. What is the law that frees the slaves? The 13th Amendment. That's what frees the slaves everywhere. The Emancipation Proclamation simply, the purpose of it is part of the Anaconda Plan. He wants to free the slaves in the South. Has no intention of freeing the slaves in the border states. But in 1863, January 1st, it declares forever free the slaves in the Confederate States in rebellion. That's what it says. Forever free. Those in bondage in the border states were not affected. Slavery continued on as it always had. But all told, about 800,000 people were freed by it. 800,000 slaves. It sounds, we think of the Emancipation Proclamation, how wonderful it is. It's a political move because it really doesn't, it doesn't free all the slaves. In fact, he frees the slaves where he can't. What authority does he have over this other country? He doesn't. But that's what the Emancipation Proclamation does. Okay? Nevertheless, what happens when word reaches the ears of slaves in the South about this? Do you think it provides them with a little excitement and encouragement to try to help out the war cause in the North? It certainly does. Thousands of slaves who were jubilant about the proclamation throw down their picks and shovels and flock to the North. Or just try to find the nearest invading army. Like, hey, we are slaves and we need you. And it works. It strips down the already rundown plantations of their workforces. So in this sense, the Emancipation Proclamation was, kind of like, it's successful in what it does with the Anaconda Plan. 1 in 7 Southern slaves ran away. 1 in 7 to a Union camp. So the proclamation is essential and it is important. And it does clearly foreshadow the ultimate doom of slavery everywhere, which eventually does happen in 1865 with the 13th Amendment. But the Emancipation Proclamation also fundamentally changes the nature of the war. Because now there's not going to be a negotiated settlement. Before the South was like, okay, we'll stop fighting. as long as we can keep our slaves, we'll go back to normal. All right? It was always thought that they could just stop fighting and, like, okay, we're going to go back to normal. We're going to have slavery, and you guys can do, and we'll just go back to the way we were. Once the Emancipation Proclamation is issued and slavery is no more, now it becomes a fight to the death. We're going to fight until somebody has to submit, as opposed to a negotiated settlement. All right? Fight to a finish. So, I think that's a good place to stop. Hope you learned some stuff today.